Welcome. So, when we think about advanced asana, I hope that you take away from our studies with yoga that advanced asana is not necessarily about how dramatic the pose is. Advanced asana is about advancing your technique within the pose. Um, Advanced asana is about awakening your Tadasana in phenomenal ways, day after day, year after year. And so that's the idea of stepping deeper into this science and into this practice, which is profound and thousands of years old. So I am going to be sharing with you the 5 universal principles of alignment. Be prepared to drink out of a fire hose. This is way more than I expect you to fully ingest at this time. I was introduced to these principles 15 years ago or so, and I am still discovering new things about them, and they are still the bedrock of my personal asana practice. So, like I said, I'm going to throw them all at you. There's a handout to go with this. When I teach these in public classes, because I do want my students to understand these principles, I pick one tenet of one principle. So there's 5 and each are threefold. So that's 15 and they can be broken down further there. But I pick one tenet of one principle and I build my class around that, usually taking them progressively deeper into the expression, right? The physical expression of that principle. Hopefully, I'm also landing with them that I want them to take this away and continue to practice it. And this is what I hope lands with all of you. So the 5 universal principles of alignment was introduced to me through my studies in Anusara years ago. The school of Anusara has somewhat dissolved at this point, but the founder of Anusara, John Friend, did a really nice job of systematizing alignment principles. So I want you to hear this. We always want to simplify our studies to a structure that we can go back to and then build upon. So the universal principles of alignment, John Friend did a wonderful job creating a very concise, systematic approach to broad strokes of alignment. Of course, we can learn what every muscle does, what every joint does, what every tendon does, but you're talking about more doctoral studies or graduate studies when you learn all of those little nuances. And it's not that I don't encourage you to do that. Please do so. The Anatomy Coloring Book, phenomenal resource. Science of Yoga, phenomenal resource. And these are 2 of many. But these universal principles of alignment just give you a basic ground to build upon. They have allowed me to better conceptualize the greater intricacies of anatomy and physiology and biomechanics, and on it goes. So, the 5 universal principles of alignment. Again, we break down for our students and for ourselves individual tenets of this greater science. But the idea is in time, our body is pulsating with these principles in harmony with each other. The science of yoga constantly returns to the balance of duality, right? Seeing beyond duality to reality. And life isn't an either or, a black or white, or right or wrong, but it's the gray area. Wisdom requires moment to moment discernment on what to do with your knowledge and your understanding relative to the situation at hand. So these principles provide a great bedrock for us to explore the balance of confliction within our body. Um, Physiologically speaking, or speaking in line with the musculoskeletal system, this balance of inner contradiction, confliction, is the expression of tensegrity within the spine, balance tension within the spine, tensegrity. If my anterior muscles, the muscles in the front of my body, are hypertonic, meaning overactive, they're going to be in constant contraction. If the posterior muscles, the muscles in the back of my body, are hypotonic, underactive, they're going to give in to the pull of the front body muscles. And so my spine begins to get an imbalance of tension in it. So you may be like, but Lindy, tension, yoga, no. But that's what it's all about. And when we're working with our students, we start with strength. So think about a tent with a center pole, right? That tent with the fabric lying over it, the fabric has to be pulled tautly with the exact amount of pressure in all directions. And then you have this beautiful structure that remains upright effortlessly in a sense, right? If there's too much tension in the rope on the right side of the tent, it's going to pull the pole down, and God forbid anyone's within the tent when that happens. The same is true of our spine. We want even strength in our back body relative to our front body, and it holds the spine effortlessly. And the same is true when we look at obliques and the lateral side of the body, but hopefully you get the idea with this tensegrity. So the 5 universal principles of alignment become this inner pulsation. Our pose becomes aligned, and our dhyana, our focus, is directed to all these different parts of our body, and it fills our dharana, our meditation, our contemplation, our awareness, as we constantly calibrate the body and all the subtle nuances within the body based on these principles. Of course, these principles, paired with your continued studies for years to come, will continue to awaken, and reawaken your practice. Here we go. The 5 universal principles of alignment. Universal. We apply these principles to every single pose. Now, if we're in a more active vinyasa, strength building class, we engage the muscle tone and the action a little bit more. If we're in a moderate class, it's a moderate tone in the muscles. I'm not ripping as if I'm going through 75 chaturangas. If it's in a gentle class, I gently tone the muscles as I move my body softly with plenty of room for breath. If it's in a restorative class, these principles are applied to teach us how to disengage the body, how to strategically relax the body. Most of our students and most of our practitioners, myself included, are better acquainted with tension, subtle tension in the body, than we are with the experience and the capacity of deep relaxation. So it helps to feel the upper inner thighs turn on or the pinky toe side of the foot engage in asana, active asana, because then when our teacher is guiding us through Shavasana and they're saying, relax the thighs, they're like, oh, I have sensation here now. Relax the ankle, the feet, the toes. And they're like, oh, I have sensation here now. Oh, wow, she's remaining tense or whatever it may be. They're beautiful. Tap into these principles because they're a gateway to a lifetime of understanding and being able to relate to your students and provide personalized feedback for your students. I'll say the 5 first, and you can see these on your sheet. The first is open to grace. The second is muscular energy. The third is inner rotation or inner spiral. The fourth is outer rotation or outer spiral. The fifth is organic energy. This is the first time I have thrown all of them at anyone at once, in a sense. I have always broken them down one tenet of one principle at a time. I choose to give them all to you now because I feel that when I do that, it gets discombobulated. And the greater system is lost. So this is that video. This is that opportunity for me to just throw it all at you. Remember what I said. You're drinking out of a fire hose here. So first thing, don't stress. I have studied and studied and studied and studied these year after year after year. I will gladly engage you in discussion around these things. It is so much fun. I encourage you to walk away with what lands. Don't worry about the rest. If hugging the midline is something that you're like, oh, I can connect with that, work with that, because you're creating the groundwork for deeper and deeper understanding. And then what's fun is that 5 years from now, you'll come back to midline and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing something new and different. 5 primary principles of alignment: open to grace, muscle energy, inner rotation or inner spiral, outer rotation or outer spiral, organic energy. Open to grace, 3 tenets. Open to grace. First, set your foundation. So this means even weight distribution in all points of your foundation. Your foundation changes from pose to pose. In this pose, my foundation is more of my lateral right leg, lateral side of my left foot, and my sit bones. The idea is to become first aware of my foundation, and then balance in each point of foundation, and then evenly distribute weight across all points of foundation. So instead of it being predominantly in my right sit bone, I'm calibrating between left and right. A little bit easier here, hands and knees. So ask yourself, what is Lindy's foundation? That's right, it's my hands, my knees, and the tops of my feet. When passive, the weight dumps more into the heel of my hand. So the first part of foundation is noticing what is my foundation. Lindy goes hands, knees, feet. Second part is balancing in each point of foundation. So I evenly distribute the weight in all 4 points of my right palm and fingertips. I do the same in my left. Then I distribute weight evenly from my big toe to my little toe, and to the best of my ability from my right to left knee. So the first part of foundation, notice your foundation. Second part, balance each individual point of foundation. Third part, balance across all points of foundation. Meaning I want, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 points of foundation down. I can't do quick math, but roughly I want a 6th in my right hand, a 6th in my left hand, a 6th in my right foot, 6th in my left, and 6th in the right and left knees, respectively. So suddenly my pose is a lot more active than we're in hands and knees. When are we going to do something, teacher? All right. I'm engaging. I could spend a whole class like this and get sore from it the next day. In Tadasana, I'm not going to stand up. You can just look at my feet here, but imagine I'm in Tadasana. The soles of the feet are the foundation. And instead of just slipping into compensatory patterns, patterns of compensation, right, whatever your habits are, this is mine, we balance evenly, ball of the big toe, little toe, inner heel, outer heel, and the left foot, and in the right foot, and across both feet then. So oftentimes it's best to explore these in static poses, but the idea is you begin to carry these principles through flow. We'll get there. We're on the first principle, open to grace. I just discussed foundation. Notice, balance each individual point, then balance across all points. Foundation. The second tenet of open to grace is spinal extension. And this refers to axial extension, which is tip of the tailbone through crown of the head going evenly in opposite directions. Spinal extension, anatomically speaking, is the anterior body gets longer than the posterior body. This is what I call heart openers. So it's axial extension, lengthening evenly on all sides of the spine. The third tenet of open to grace is inner body bright. Right? So you can take a moment where you are and just slouch a little bit and let your body get heavy, sag. Then take a deep inhale as if filling a balloon and create a lightness in your body, a buoyancy in the joints. Keep this as you exhale. Do this again, inhale and exhale. So this is the idea of inner body bright. Imagine in like crow pose, right? Bakrasana, where it's an arm balance where you're on your hands and the knees are at the tricep. It's intensely tight and contractive, but even there we can find expansion. So these aren't either or principles. They are yes and. Open to grace, foundation. Experiment with it. Axial extension. Try this. Get long in your spine, get short in your spine. Get long in your spine, get short in your spine. Get long in your spine, get short in your spine. Inner body bright. Let your body become heavy and lethargic. Let it become bright and expansive, as if even opening in the pores of your skin, and explore this a couple times. So these are principles that we actively apply to our practice of asana. Open to grace. Moving on, muscle energy. Muscle energy, 3 tenets. Muscle to bone, midline, periphery to core. Muscle energy is the one I use the most in general public classes, and especially with new students, as well as clients in the yoga therapy clinic. Oftentimes it's teaching them how to engage their muscles. I constantly return to it. Muscle energy. So this is the kinetic energy in the body. The first is muscle to bone, muscle contraction. So I use terminology that's easy to land versus contract your muscles, everyone. A number of students that'll land, but if I can give them articulation that helps land in a way that they can relate it to their own physical experience, that's what we're after, and you'll hear more about that. So muscle to bone, muscle contraction. So if I hold my arm out and I relax, yes, there's muscle contraction holding my arm out. But if I touch it, it's soft for the most part, right? Right? So now if I make a fist and I flex that muscle, there's less give, right? And so the idea is in every part of your body, in every pose, we're putting on this muscle suit. So right now, I'm engaging my legs, my feet, my ankles, my core, my glutes, my back, my abdomen, chest, upper back, arms, even through my neck and throat, into my skull, and I'm softening the features of the face, and I relax. Muscle to bone. So when you find yourself dumping into a pose, you have the choice to stay there. The choice is yours. You also have the choice to cultivate something deeper, right? To add on a little layer of effort. And the beautiful thing is these layers add and add over the years. They have a cumulative effect, muscle to bone. Even when my arms aren't weight bearing, they're active as if I was going to go up into a handstand at any time. Hug the midline. Midline is the center line of the body. The spine runs down it. That's your midline. So the idea here, I'm coming up. So this is my common stance. I tend to abduct my legs. So midline is huge for me. You will meet people who are more here, and this will apply more to organic energy. But midline is hugging the thighs in. Oftentimes I'll have students place a block between their thighs, engage that muscle to bone. So watch, no muscle to bone, muscle to bone, muscle contraction. And then I'll have them hug the block. And I'll say, that's your midline, keep it going. Then I'll say, remove the block, shake it out, stand tall. Try this with me if you'd like. Engage your legs muscle to bone, and now hug as if the block were there. That's different than just squeeze your legs together, because now my knees are compromised, right? I imagine this energetic resistance, and I hug in. For the arms, we'll see this with shoulders drawing together. I hug my arms. I'll tell students sometimes, imagine you're squeezing a beach ball. And take the arms overhead. I've had them squeeze blocks before, right? That applies behind the back as well. So when I have students clasp hands behind their back, this is often the things I see. The elbows are locked and the wrists are passive. So the wrists are getting different types of compression. The elbows are getting different types of compression. So I have them engage the midline here. First thing, unlock the elbows. Second, draw palms together. So they're having to work. Third, I'll tell them to draw the upper arms together. Maintain this action versus, I could do this all day long. Engage. So that's the midline there. The third, periphery to core. This is retraction. You're going to see this show up in our handstand conditioning. Retraction, basically the head of the arm bone draws back into the shoulder socket. We see this a lot with new students. They're in a sense dislocating their shoulders. They're unplugging their shoulders, and we live like this. So we're here to support, to be the change. So things in Tadasana, we have students draw the shoulders on their back, but some of them who don't know, they're like, my arms are going up. Why wouldn't my shoulders go up? But this can be really problematic to the rotator cuff, the cervical spine, and that's just a couple basic things. So we have them draw their shoulders down as they lift their chest. So this is a periphery to core thing. Periphery, anatomically speaking, is the distal end. It's the furthest end to core, the core of my body. Periphery draws into core. This happens in the legs as well, as oftentimes students will become disconnected in the legs to achieve a more advanced expression of the pose. The periphery, the sole of my foot, draws into the core of my pelvis. One way I explore this with students, I'll have them step on a block, let the opposite leg hang, and then I'll say, flex the foot and draw the sole of the foot away from the earth. Watch what happens in my hip. 3, 2, 1. And so now this muscular infrastructure around my hip socket is engaged. And notice how my pelvis is more even versus here. Pelvic instability, huge source of chronic pain. So from the sole of my foot, I draw up. 3, 2, 1. And yes, you apply this in the practice of asana. This is where you'll begin to notice why I'm saying what I'm saying in our asana techniques. For example, in Warrior One, we tell people to square the hips off. That's one aspect. But if I draw thigh bones into the hip socket, it's a different aspect. So watch me here. So yes, it's one thing to square my hips off in Warrior One. But if I'm not doing this work here, I'm missing out on an opportunity. Here it goes. I'll do the front leg first. 3, 2, 1, knee to hip. Now I'll do the back leg. Now I'll do the back leg. 3, 2, 1. So now my legs are working. And I have to readjust my foundation. Pulsating principles. Oh, so much reward out of these. Okay, muscle energy. Muscle to bone. Where's the gym action? Hug the midline. Tighten it up. Periphery, toes, fingers to core, right? Even here, I sit. If I draw my knees towards my hips, 3, 2, 1, it creates a different response in the pelvis, more neutrality in my spine and in my skeletal structure. Open to grace, muscle energy. Now we move on to internal rotation. And this is literally internal rotation, specifically of the shoulders and the hips. For me, that's quite profound as I tend to be externally rotated in my hips, although you will have students who are internally rotated, and the next principle, external rotation, will apply more to them. This is where you begin to see different patterns in people's bodies. You're like, oh my goodness. When a student walks in like this, you're like, okay, they'll really benefit from hug the midline and from axial extension. And you may notice a number of other things, but we want to give our students things that they can digest. If I'm like, hey, Anthony, balance your foundation and engage your legs, man, and like hug your midline and unlock your knees and take your shoulders back and, lengthen through the crown of your head. And I mean, come on, like you need to be meditating at least 75 minutes every hour. So you need to get on it. And by the way, you're still eating solid foods. Your student is like, melt down. We give them one thing. We're like, hey, Anthony, you're doing awesome. That looks really great. And I've noticed you're engaging your muscles more. Keep that going. And I'm going to tell you something about midline, but we're going to wait, come back next class. We want our students to know that we want to work with them for a long period of time versus, all right, you sweated, you're welcome, bye. Get to know them, get to study their bodies, and get excited about what you get to teach them. Okay, internal rotation. So with the legs, you could think of in, back, and apart. These are the three tenets: in, back, and apart. Top of the thighs move in. Inner thighs move back. Back thighs move apart. Right? I'll turn sideways. I'm going to exaggerate this. This is a closed chain movement, meaning my foot, my distal end of my limb is fixed in place. I'm going to show you an open chain movement, and we'll talk about the differences. But here comes an exaggerated internal rotation, and I will adjust my foundation to accommodate this within the joints of my body. Internal rotation in 3, 2, 1. Top of my thighs are moving in, inner thighs are moving back, upper outer thighs are moving apart. I encourage you to go shopping at the grocery store and just see how many people you meet. So that's an exaggerated expression of it, but I do that. I exaggerate it so I can feel it and apply it in subtle ways, in powerful ways, in dynamic ways. Got a strong internal rotation happening right now. For me, balance with the other principles, we'll get there. My tendency is this. Pelvis comes forward, thighs roll out. Create some structural weaknesses in the body, and that's where chronic pain arises, and that's where acute injury can come from. So for me, internal rotation isn't that duck walk, it's more this. And again, notice how I adjust my foundation. These are pulsating principles. In, back, apart. Closed chain, my foot's down. You get some detection of movement. Open chain, distal end, free. Watch this. Hey class, lift your right foot. Take the top of your thigh in, your heel out. Now really pay attention to what's happening in your hip. Maybe put your hands there and feel that. Breathe while you're here. We want to recreate this, build a muscle memory. Take the leg down, shake it out a little bit. Now let's do the same thing on the second side, and I hope you're doing this with me. Stand to your right foot, bend your left knee. If you need stability, grab a wall, a chair, a friend. Top of your thigh in, left heel out. 3, 2, 1. Awesome job, Selena. Great work, Cara. Excellent job, Ashley. Right? So we want to say, I see it, yes. You're doing it, now feel it. Take it down, shake it out, recreate. We expose them to the same principles again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Repetition is everything. It's how we have learned anything. Even those with advanced degrees and graduate studies and tremendous expertise that came through repetition, 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 something added, repetition, repetition, something added. So keep this in mind for your own practice, but be confident in that you have something to share and offer your students in their practices. Internal rotation of the legs. So in poses, well, very, very evident in hero's pose, but in poses where the legs tend to, triangle pose is a good one. Internal rotation can help set the hips in place. There's going to be an external rotation capacity balanced with it, but we'll get there. But in every pose, we find this internal rotation. In Utkatasana, I find internal rotation. In Hasta Padangusthasana, I find internal rotation. We're going to build and build and build on these things. The arms, bend your elbows. Internal rotation in the arms, elbows out, fingers in. Now, one thing I'll say, shake it out. I find internal rotation to be more relevant in the legs for most people, but again, that's not always the case. I have students who come to me and this is their chronic posture. So again, this isn't a rule. This is just a overarching theme I see. Internal rotation tends to be more relevant. A lot of students I see come with an external rotation, but just train your eye. Arms are different. Most students come with an internal rotation. This is tight pectoral muscles, strained traps and rhomboids, among other things. Think about sitting at a computer. Think about eating dinner and hanging out with friends. Think about driving. Think about picking up things and embracing our loved ones. Everything is here. The arms tend to come here. A good way to notice this is when people just come into Tadasana, and if you can see their palms behind them, that is a good indicator of internally rotated shoulders. This can cause cervical havoc. This can compress chest and lungs. So internal rotation is relevant in many ways. For example, Warrior Two, and there is a pulsation of internal and external, but Warrior Two, a lot of times I'll have students turn palms up and strongly externally rotate. We'll get there. And then I'll say, rotate your palms down and engage strongly. So we're sophisticating the musculature of the arm. The same is true in down dog. Watch my shoulders here. A lot of times we'll see students here at the beginning, so we tell them things like lower your shoulders, down your back, open the eye of your elbow, so that looks like this. Neck's a lot happier. But then we see the base of the index floating, and so we say things like root the base of your index. That's an internal rotation in the arms. Again, this is a slightly more sophisticated technique to apply because a lot of your students are going to initially benefit and regularly benefit from external rotation in the arms. So internal rotation is when the thighs and the arms rotate medially. It's medial rotation. They're rolling into the midline of the body relative to the anterior, the front of the body. All right, so that was the third principle. The fourth universal principle of alignment. Again, you're drinking through a fire hose. Just stay with me. Take away whatever lands and set the rest aside. You've got a lifetime of study ahead of you. Fourth principle, external rotation or lateral rotation, because we're rotating the limbs to the lateral aspect of our body, the outline of the body and legs, like the outer seam of my yoga pants here. That's lateral, right? So, external rotation, remember, internal rotation is in, back, apart. External rotation is the opposite. Out, forward, together. So my thighs, top of my thighs move out, inner thighs move forward, sit bones move together. For me, this is not what I need. This is my stance, right? Although through my practice, this is more my stance today. I've changed that and I continue to work on it because when I let my practice fall by the wayside, I'll catch myself doing things like this. Right? So our practice gives us so much. Okay, but again, I've worked with people here and I remember when I first, because I thought everyone walked like this as a young teacher. And I remember finding a student after class and she was talking like this and I was just blown away by it. So anyways, so for students who are more internally rotated, this is really going to help them. Again, I generally teach internal rotation in most of my classes, but I'm watching. But there are tenets to this external rotation as well, and they become this great pulsating principle. Shoulders, I teach external rotation more often than internal rotation, right? Generally, the internal rotation is safe for y'all, teacher trainees. External rotation in the shoulders, have your students take their palms up. Tell them to take their thumbs away from each other and really emphasize that in the upper back. And go, feel that, feel that, feel that. One thing I'll say to look out for, a lot of times students will do this. They'll strain their neck forward and go, Linda, you're doing great, but lift your chin and take your ears back. Oh, yeah. And then say, keep that going as you extend your arms for Tadasana. And find out what you're capable of. We're going to explore this with Chaturanga, because Chaturanga, we get a lot of shoulder protraction. This is shoulder retraction. We're retracting into the shoulder socket. Very similar with periphery to core. So these principles dance together in amazing ways. Okay? But let me show you a little bit of the balance of internal and external rotation in some of these poses here. All right, so we're going to showcase this internal and external rotation in Hasta Padangusthasana. Variation, grab your knee, all right? So I hope that you're kind of playing along with some of these things, but we're not in this like deep, warm practice, so your muscles are gonna be a little cold, so honor that. So perhaps you grab the knee, perhaps you grab the big toe. So I mentioned earlier here, internal rotation is applied. 3, 2, 1. And notice I get that butt out. I exaggerated. This is one of my favorite exercises. Now from here, the lateral aspects of my legs are also going to engage. Watch what happens to my pelvis in 3, 2, 1. My pelvis is more neutral here versus here versus here. And I'm working like crazy, everyone. Totally different experience. I keep this top shoulder, both shoulders, externally rotating. Okay, so feel free to try that with both legs, right? So this is the and I was a competitive cheerleader, so I mean no disrespect, but this is like the cheerleader asana where the pelvis comes forward. We internally rotate. Holy cow, inner thighs working like crazy, remains active as I externally rotate both shoulders on my back, chest lift. Meanwhile, foundation, inner body bright, spine long, muscle to bone, midline, periphery to core, internal, external, and organic energy. Breathe in, breathe out, release. Open to grace, muscle energy, internal rotation, external rotation. Fifth principle, organic energy. Yeah, organic energy. So organic energy is the twin soul to muscle energy. What were the 3 principles of muscle energy? Oh, wait, say them. Challenge yourself, dig deep, look at your notes. What were the 3 principles of muscle energy? Remember, if you start anywhere, I highly recommend this. I know you got it. Muscle energy, muscle to bone, midline, periphery to core, muscle to bone, hug the midline, periphery to core. Organic energy, bone to skin, away from the midline, core to periphery. Sister soul. Okay? So organic energy plays a little bit with open to grace as well, right? So strong contraction. Yes, young grasshopper. But now from your bones, expand to your skin. Create a softness instead of an all or nothing response in your body. We actually have an asana lab on this one this weekend. Expand away from the midline. Back to the block. Hug the midline, you can hug the block. Expand away from the midline, try to drop the block. And I always encourage touch, right? Like it's probably not appropriate for you to tell your students to hug the block and go, you feel that? You feel that, Jill? Hopefully Jill punches you in the face because that's a violation, right? But you could say, ladies and gentlemen, feel the action, right? Feel the action of the inner thighs. Awaken their touch, their sensate experience, proprioception, interoception. Learn those terms. So expand away, try to drop the block and have them feel what's going on in the outer leg and say, that's great, keep that going. Stand in Tadasana. Remember to adjust your foundation whenever needed, but engage as if you were trying to drop the block. Here I go, 3, 2, 1. And it's not like, oh, I did it and I'm done. I'm holding this action. Now imagine pairing this with hugging the midline. You're going to get this weekend. As if trying to hug your shins together and take your thighs apart. Relax. So again, remember, in my public classes and in my teacher trainings, I break these down, one tenet of one principle per class, in a sense. You're drinking through a fire hose. So ask yourself, where might expand away from the midline come in handy? I'll give you an example. A lot of times in half moon, people are here, and the standing leg is doing all the work. If we can engage the rest of their body, or we can encourage them, educate them on engaging the rest of their body, the pose comes together effortlessly because it has tensegrity, a balance of opposing forces of tension that create harmony. All right. So this person who's trying to get their half moon, if they knew how to actively abduct the top leg, which is away from the midline, and the same action in the standing leg, suddenly the legs become powerful. And then there's so much to add to the top, right? So again, watch this here. They're fighting here as they learn to engage as if pushing against a resistance, as if trying to drop a block in the top leg. But then watch when I do it in my bottom leg, 3, 2, 1. My pelvis opens and aligns more. So these principles are deep, profound. There's so much to learn. I just want you to have a big overview. Organic energy. Bone expands to the skin, as if the pores of the skin were opening. Hug away from the midline. This is abduction. Hugging the midline is A-D, adduction. So finding, not just moving the limbs, but engaging the action, the energy, the intention of abduction away from the midline. And then there's core to periphery. For most students, they're disconnected at the joint, so I start with periphery to core, but once that's integrated, I teach them core to periphery. Here it goes, 3, 2, 1. And there's still that drawing towards the midline, towards the core, and expanding away, right? Same is true in downward facing dog, Anthony. Right, we have them externally rotate, internally rotate. We make sure that their shoulders are plugged in, but then at some point there comes a balance of retraction with protraction. I'm not coming here. There's a check and balance in place. And this is what prepares us for the healing benefit of asanas such as handstand. A lot's been thrown at you. I'd like you to think about what's landing, what's sticking with you. Hopefully now you can better pay attention to the key actions I give in the asana labs that we share. You don't need to go further than this at this point in your studies, in my opinion, because these are huge, broad brushstrokes, and they will feed your knowledge for years and years to come. Happy practicing, happy teaching. Thank you. I've enjoyed this time with you. Until we meet again, namaste.